Each episode this season, we're going to get to know more about some of the people working behind the scenes at our tournaments. First up, it's Donna Kelso, one of the team of WTA supervisors. Donna and her colleagues work with the players and other WTA staff to ensure every tournament runs as smoothly as possible.
Just starting out my 19th year as a WTA supervisor. Prior to that, I started my career in tennis officiating back as a 16-year-old in my school holidays, going to umpire at the old New South Wales Open, which is now the Sydney tournament. Then progressed to become a chair umpire at the age of 17. My first overseas tournament was Wimbledon as a 20-year-old chair umpire, and I got hooked on the travels and the life of working in tennis.
Yeah, well, I've known Donna for as long as I can remember, ever since I was a junior, and I would go to the tournament office, and she was kind of dealing with all the big fishes, and I would just kind of mingle around and see what all the WTA staff was doing. So I've always had very fond memories of her job, and little by little started taking me out to grandstand or to center court, and then I would see her sitting there on the side with her walkie-talkie and making sure that everything in the circumstances was going well.
I think she's always trying to help the players. I remember last year here when I twisted my ankle, she was like every day coming, like, Arbin, how's your ankle today? I'm like, bad, going up bad.
Is there such a thing as a normal day? I don't know. A normal tournament week as such would mean arriving in the tournament city a day or so prior to sign-in. We coordinate basically everything on site with all of our different departments within the WTA, overseas sign-in, making the draws, making the order of play, and then liaising with tournament directors, players, coaches, tournament staff, broadcast, sponsors, and lots of other wonderful people. Martina Hingis is looking for you. Where would I find you, please?
We get all sorts of people popping into the WTA office.
The most exciting and rewarding part of the job is the interaction that we have with so many different people, in particular with the athletes, with the players, and seeing so many of them now having come through from joining the WTA Tour, probably from their junior days, coming through, coming up the rankings, winning events, and being part of experiencing their highlights.
Good evening, everybody. It's my absolute pleasure and privilege to be here this evening and share with you a little bit about my journey through officiating in the sport of tennis. So as you saw from the video, my career currently is that of a WTA supervisor and at the Grand Slams as a Grand Slam supervisor, something I've been doing for the past 20 years. WTA, the Women's Tennis Association, being the leading women's sport professionally. And as you can see, an awful lot of prize money involved in women's professional tennis. Sadly, in officiating, not quite so much. So my job consists of travelling approximately 25 weeks a year internationally. Just arrived back from the US yesterday from working at the Indian Wells tournament, the UMPIRE Open. My off season is April, so I'm home for a little while and then heading back to Europe in May for Roland Garros and Wimbledon. It's a privilege working with elite tennis players, but it started many more years earlier than that. Officiating today, and especially working for the WTA, is very relevant in terms of the empowerment of women, equality. As Ash mentioned with some of the data that's been collected, there still is quite a significant ratio of far more male than female officials. When I started as an international official, I was only one of 2 gold badge chair umpires in the world who was a female. There were probably about 20 males at the time. That number thankfully has risen, whereas nowadays at the top echelon of being a chair umpire, there are 10 female gold badge chair umpires and 20 males. So at least we've closed the gap a little bit in the last 20 odd years or so. Not only are our athletes role models, but so are a number of our elite officials. And you'll hear some of their stories later on. There's also been an emphasis on working mothers returning to the sport, most notably Serena Williams, Victoria Azarenka, but officials as well can have a successful career and combine having a family as well. I myself have a 15-year-old son, and he's not known any different from me being on the road 25 plus weeks a year. I went back to work when he was 2 months old, and he travelled with me, as did my husband, for the first couple of years. And we experienced travelling the world, and I was able to continue with my job. Enforcing the rules is what officiating is all about. It's about educating the athletes, educating the parents, educating the coaches, and in general, doing the best that we can for the sport. You heard me mention the NOS program. As you can see, a group of officials here. These are all Australian officials umpiring at Wimbledon. And quite a number of them, I think we've got 5 or 6 officials here who have been through the NOS program. A couple as mentors, as I had the opportunity to do so 2 years ago, and a few others as officials coming through to enhance their officiating and to learn a lot from the mentors who are involved and the various trainers and educators involved in that program. One example in the back row there, Tom Sweeney, who started as a regional official in Victoria, who has started off playing sports and then decided to move away from playing to actually officiating tennis. And some of his peers at the time allegedly weren't too impressed with his decision, but now he's umpired on centre court at the Grand Slam, so I guess he's the one with the last laugh and has achieved a wonderful career. My job as a WTA supervisor, as you saw in the video, means working with these elite athletes on a very close basis. But if you bring it back to the core, it's all about officiating and administering the rules and making decisions, ensuring that standards and procedures are adhered to, and employing the code of conduct and ensuring that officials who are at other levels, whether they be line umpires, chair umpires, chief umpires, are also performing their roles to the best of their ability. I owe my start and career trajectory to officiating, and the way I started was by winning a colouring in competition as an 8-year-old, where the first prize was a tennis racket. So of course from then I went to have some tennis lessons and loved the sport. I was never going to be a great athlete. The teacher, the owner of our tennis school, Bill Gilmore, was a highly successful player in his day and also an internationally renowned referee and supervisor. He at the time was the referee for the Sydney International, so recruited a lot of the ball kids and the line umpires to work at that event. I tried out to be a ball girl, but at the age of 14 I wasn't very successful. My best friend was, but I didn't quite make it. I was asked to become an official at the age of 14, but my parents weren't too keen on that idea, so I held off for a couple of years, and at the age of 16 went to a 2-hour line umpire training session. So basically we were taught, if the ball's good, you give a safe signal. If the ball's out, you call it out. If you don't see it, you give an unsighted signal. And basically that was about it. So 2 hours of training. The following week we were thrown out onto lines at the New South Wales Open. And there was a group of us who started at that very same line umpire training session. One of those other officials being Wayne McEwen, who is now the Australian Open referee. So the two of us started our journey together in that same 2-hour line umpire training session. From there, I joined the Umpires Association and started doing chairs at the age of 17. The first match I was in the chair for was an under-12 boys singles final. I can still remember the players: Grant Doyle, Jamie Holmes. For some reason, it sticks in my mind, and that was where I started as a chair umpire. But also when I went to tennis lessons on the weekend when it rained, our lessons weren't cancelled at all. Instead, we were moved into the shed and we were taught the rules of tennis. When I played local tournaments and junior competition, it was part of the culture in the day to umpire. You play a match, lose a match more often than not, and then you get up in the chair to umpire the next one. When we played Saturday morning competition, every single set, every single match was umpired by either somebody from our team or for the other team. And again, that was part of the culture growing up. It was what was the norm. It was acceptable to umpire as well as to play. At the age of 19, I wrote off to Wimbledon, long before the days of computers and email and even fax machines, and asked how to become an umpire at Wimbledon. I got a response back saying, well, we need to know a little bit more about what you've achieved, and I was chosen to take part in an international officiating school a couple of months later. So they said to me, let us know how you go in that school. It's the equivalent, for those of you involved in tennis, of a level 3 school, bronze badge school. And let us know how you go, and then we'll be making our decisions as to who's going to be officiating at Wimbledon. Anyway, I was the youngest official to attend that school and had the least on-court experience. But I studied that rule book and I nailed the exam and came top of the class in terms of the written examination. I even beat Richard Ings. For those of you who've heard that name, he was one of my best mates growing up and went on to become the first Australian professional tennis official. So I wrote back to Wimbledon and said I passed the school, came top of the school, sent them my results, and the following year, 1986, at the age of 20, umpired my first Grand Slam at Wimbledon. So starting off as a line umpire, that had nothing to do with me, that call, by the way. I just happened to be standing behind Mr. McEnroe, who, as I was growing up, was my childhood idol. So I was quite surprised to see that photo on the back of the Sun or the Mirror or whatever tabloid it was on. I think maybe because of McEnroe being such a rebel on the tennis court, that maybe somehow got me interested in how to enforce the rules, how to enforce the code of conduct, and maybe that's what sparked my interest in officiating that little bit more. We'll roll forward 20 odd years, and a couple of years ago I was the supervisor at a WTA tournament where we also had some men's legends matches at which McEnroe was playing. So he's the only person in the world I've ever really been starstruck around. And I went over to him and introduced myself. He had his head down and I'm expecting him to start yelling at me. And slid this photo underneath him and said, oh, I hope you don't mind signing something for me. He looked at it, looked up at me. Oh, that's got to be late 80s, early 90s. Said, yes, 1988, and that's me as a line umpire. And there we are, a couple of years ago, and he signed that photo for me. So as I mentioned, being a chair umpire at Wimbledon, I think for any official involved in whatever sport you may be in, there's always some upper echelon, some holy grail, and for tennis officials, it's that centre court at Wimbledon. Australian Open has also played a very big part in my journey, in my career, as has the US Open. So here you can see, just another day in the office. That's what we do, enforce the rules. But the one thing I think that we can take out of situations such as this is that we apply the rules, we enforce the rules, and we communicate the rules, no matter what the match is, no matter who the player is, whether it's first round qualifying at a local satellite event, or whether it's a semi-final of the US Open. We're treating all athletes the same in the way we enforce the rules. There are a lot of challenges that I faced.
You're not getting away that easy. And tell the story behind that photo, please.
Hands up anybody who remembers this particular incident? Yeah, okay. So Serena Williams playing Kim Clijsters' US Open semi-final, and earlier on in the match, Serena had been foot faulted. So there was something building. At the end of the first set, she threw her racket, broke her racket, ending up in a code violation with a warning for racket abuse. It was a very tight, tense match. It had been raining earlier in the day, and I think tempers got a little frayed. Towards the end of the second set, Serena served a fault, and then second serve, line umpire calls foot fault. So a lot of you are thinking, and a lot of people have said to me, how could that line umpire have the audacity to call a foot fault on match point? It was a foot fault. The chair umpire from the chair could see that it was a foot fault. So many other people could see it was a foot fault. Calling a foot fault is no different to calling a ball in or out. So the line umpire was only doing their job. So Serena went to get a ball to serve the next point, spun around, and from where I was sitting, right at the other end of the court, I had no idea what she was saying, but from her body language, you could tell that it wasn't very pleasant. From then, the line-up came up to the chair umpire to make her report, and as I was sitting next to the US Open referee at the time, Brian Early, I was saying to myself, Brian, come on, we've got to go, come on. Because when we're training to be chair umpires, one of the most effective methods is by watching videos of incidents. When you get to a crucial point in that incident, you press the pause button. How many of you do that in your training for officials? And that's what it felt like for me. I was watching a video of something happening and pressed the pause button. I had to make a decision, I had to act. So what we do as a referee or as a supervisor is a little bit of fact finding as soon as we get on the court. First thing we do, we speak to the chair umpire to find out factually what's happened, and after that we then go to the athlete themselves to hear their side of the story. End result, I asked Serena, did you say the F word? Yeah, I said it. I said, well, that's it. And if you watch it on video, you can actually see me mouthing the words to her. You cannot say that on a tennis court. It's not acceptable. Because she was down match point and she'd already had a warning. The next was a point penalty. That was it, game, set, match. As a junior official, there were so many challenges and so many obstacles in our way, but somehow we managed to overlook those and persevere. It wasn't really cool to be an official at such a young age, but we had a great group of friends. There was a lot of camaraderie. When we finished umpiring for the day, we'd maybe head out for dinner, or we'd arrange social functions throughout the year. Being female was tough in what was and still is a relatively male-dominated sport. Location, for those of you in Queensland, I'm sure a lot of you travel long distances to go to sporting events to officiate. So that was one of the major factors. Also being in Australia, trying to travel to events overseas also contributed to the challenges. There was no formal pathway during that time. It was just, do the best you can, reach out to whoever you could, make contacts, network, and try and get into events. There was a lot more rejection than there was acceptance. So the number of tournaments that I wrote to, some of them didn't write back at all. Some of them did write back, sorry, we've got enough. So it was quite disheartening at times, but again, something from within allowed me to persevere. Too much too soon is something that we see occasionally with our officials who perhaps show potential, and we try and fast track them, we try and put them into a position where we think they're going to thrive. That happened to me at the age of 19, being assigned a men's singles match in the chair on centre court at White City. Yes, I passed the written exam, but my on-court experience wasn't yet to the level that it probably should have been to be doing a match like that. So a few little things happened during the match, and it's only in recent years that I've really had the courage to be able to tell this story, because I think hopefully it will help other officials. But as it got to close to the end of the second set, in the tie-break, right far sideline, line umpire flagged an out call, went back to a good call, gave an unsighted. I had no clue. There was certainly no Hawkeye in those days. And I didn't quite know how to get myself out of a pickle. Anyway, second set finished, 1 set all, obviously. Couldn't have finished in 2 sets. And sure enough, at the set break, a rather more experienced male chair umpire came and replaced me. Somehow I've managed to wipe a lot of that from my memory, and I had some great support, some great mentors, which you'll hear us talk about mentors later this evening. The word mentor didn't really exist in our vocabulary then, but I had a couple of key, strong female role models who encouraged me to get back into the chair and to keep on officiating. It wasn't so much teaching you how to be a chair umpire, but just being there for you to give you encouragement and to create opportunities. At the time, I was also working full-time in the travel industry, in a travel agency. And that was actually a benefit in that I was able to use my travel agent discounts to go off and umpire at tournaments. I've had a lot of successes as well over the 36 years or so, 36 years since I started. So 5 Grand Slam singles finals at the Australian Open, US Open Final 87. I've had the privilege of being accepted, being appointed at 4 different Olympic Games, the first one being in Barcelona as a line umpire, where I was selected in the squad for the ladies singles final. I then worked the Atlanta Olympic Games as a chair umpire, umpiring the ladies singles gold medal match. It was shortly after then that I was approached by one of the head supervisors from the WTA, who is actually my current boss today, asking if I'd be interested in becoming a WTA supervisor. By then, the Sydney Games had been announced to be held in 2000, and I'm from Sydney. So you can imagine having the opportunity to officiate at a home Olympic Games was something that I had to think twice about. And I wasn't sure if I was ready to become a supervisor and give up what was a fairly certain role as a chair umpire in the Sydney Olympics. I spoke to a handful of people who I really valued and trusted, and they all said to me, what are you going to keep doing? You're just going to rack up numbers of finals and matches. You've got nothing to lose by taking on a new adventure. So I took their advice, and my last match in the chair was the Australian Open Ladies Singles Final 1998. The next month started as a WTA supervisor, so in an officiating role, but off court, behind the scenes, or mostly behind the scenes, except when we have to walk on court. Being a female official and being selected to umpire and also recently to referee Davis Cup ties was a massive accomplishment. And probably the most memorable match I ever umpired was Monica Seles in her first match ever back on court after her stabbing. And 101 Grand Slams, which is pretty cool. A few of my matches in the chair. So a couple of Australian Open finals, Wimbledon, this is Los Angeles, Seles Davenport final. Some wonderful opportunities. I've also been privileged to travel to so many countries and cities that I never would have thought I would ever had the possibility to visit. Davis Cup, as you can see, it's an all-male dominated part of the sport, but yeah, here I was. Monica Seles' comeback match, she actually won her first tournament coming back. As you can see here, the final against Anka Hooper and Chris Evert during the coin toss. Olympic Games starting in Barcelona, which is quite a while ago, you can tell by the outfits. Atlanta below, where I was getting ready to umpire the ladies singles final, and then of course Sydney, where I ended up being assistant referee. So by saying no to my dreams of potentially being a chair umpire and changing that pathway in my career to become a supervisor, I ended up being rewarded anyway by working the Sydney 2000 Olympics as assistant referee for the tennis event. A number of successes off court. This first one, receiving the Bill Whip Award. It was an award that was instituted in New South Wales to be given to the most promising official in their first 5 years as an official. So very early on, I think by acknowledging our young up-and-coming officials is a very, very relevant way to keep them invested in the sport. A number of years ago, the Newcombe Medal was also brought into being, and one of the categories recognised by Tennis Australia is excellence in officiating, for which I won in 2011. In this picture with Wayne McEwen, who's the Australian Open referee, and he and I started umpiring on that very same day, a 2-hour line umpire training session when we were 16. For me, success today is to be able to give back to the sport that I love, the sport that's been able to give me a career and has enabled me to see so many places around the world, but mostly to be able to pass on those experiences to other officials, to be able to speak from my personal experience and hopefully allow them to follow their dreams and pursue their officiating career. For me, officiating is all about the 3 C's: communication, common sense, and consistency. So again, no matter where you're umpiring, where you're refereeing, no matter what level of the sport, whether it be at grassroots with under-8s, whether it be at the final of a Grand Slam, if we stick to these 3 areas, we'll be successful. Mentors, vitally important. There are 2 types of mentors, your informal and your formal. Mentors and mentee relationships can thrive if you're paired with somebody with a similar mentality. Not everybody gets on as well as everybody else, and I've seen and also been involved in some mentoring relationships that really don't succeed. But when you find somebody to be your mentor or somebody to be able to pass your experience on to who is on a very, very similar wavelength, then you can see fireworks. You can really succeed, and you can really find the benefit in seeing others succeed. I had a couple of female officials, as I mentioned, who gave me opportunities. They used their networking to be able to give me a role as a line umpire or a chair umpire in a tournament where I wouldn't have dreamt of being able to get into. And now I've got the privilege of being able to help other officials and give them contacts and help them with making their decisions on how they're going to move through their journey as an official. One thing we need to remember is that in all mentoring relationships, they should be mentee driven. So if you're mentoring somebody who's not reaching out to you, not making contact with you, chances are they probably don't even want to be in that relationship. It's the mentee who needs to make that first step in making contact, because they're the ones who are benefiting from this relationship. As we mentioned, as Ash likes to call officiating the middle child, and as I refer to it as the necessary evil, which I think is the way, unfortunately, a lot of our sporting organisations see officiating. It's expensive, it's time-consuming, but if we look at it from another perspective, it can also be unbelievably rewarding. It's educational, educating not only other officials, but athletes, particularly from a very junior level, educating the coaches and educating the parents. And by being able to do that, we gain their respect. How do we change this mentality? That's maybe something we can all think of individually as to how to change the mentality in your respective sports. Officiating should be seen as making the experience better, not only for the athletes, but the tournament organisers, for the spectators, for everybody. So by having well-trained, well-educated officials who are capable of enforcing these decisions leads to a much better environment for everybody. Officiating is not about the individual. The best officials go unnoticed by doing a good job, by not drawing attention to themselves. These are some of my badges of honour. As you can see, a number of different strains of officiating: chief, chair, referee. Now all under the umbrella of the ITF, the ATP and the WTA combined. So by having earned these accolades, that gave me the authority to be able to make the decisions and enforce the rules that I had to. A little bit of information there about officiating in Australia. You'll all be receiving handouts in your packages, so you can read a little bit more, but around 700 tennis officials in Australia. One thing I like to talk about is here in Australia having carrots to dangle. So for example, an aspiring umpire here in Queensland can look at the Brisbane International as being something that they can achieve within a year or two, potentially, of starting to officiate. Shortly after that, assuming they have the ability, the Australian Open, being a Grand Slam nation, one of 4 Grand Slam nations in the world, and hosting a Grand Slam, our officials have got a lot more opportunities available to them than to somebody, for example, from Greece, from Sri Lanka, where tennis is maybe not that popular as it is in Australia. So Tennis Australia at the moment is working on a couple of pathways in particular. One to recruit ball kids once they've reached a particular age, to then transition them into officiating, and another one in former players, or those who played tennis and knew they were never going to be an elite athlete, but loved the sport and wished to stay involved. So again, some challenges that we all face. choosing between whether we go on holidays during our vacation time, or whether we choose another job, part-time job as a student, or whether we want to play sport, or whether we want to spend time as an official. But there are so many benefits to being an official. Character building, building resilience, building self-confidence. Travel, as I've mentioned, being able to see so many different parts of the world that I never would have thought about before. Lifelong friendships. There's a young lady in the room here, Cheryl, who runs officiating in Brisbane. We met when Cheryl was a ball girl and I was a line umpire at a Davis Cup tie, and just a few years ago.
But still only 21.
Absolutely. And I'm thankful that I have friends all over the world. But most importantly, being able to give back and being engaged in the sport that we love. And being able to hold the Wimbledon trophy. And I'm just going to tell you one last little story. So, I told you a little earlier about Serena Williams and the incident that happened at the US Open. Saw her a couple of days later, and no negativity or anything, because we're both professionals. A couple of years later, standing inside the locker room at the US Open, waiting to take players out to their match on centre court, and inside the locker room, it's got the names of all the champions embossed in gold on the wall. We're both sort of standing up there, looking at all the names and all the years, and Serena says to me, 1998, that was my first year I played here. I said, that was my first year here as a supervisor. I used to be a chair umpire before that. She said, I know. Because when I was younger, coming onto the WTA tour, I wanted to be good enough that you would be my chair umpire. So, you never know where the road's going to take you and what memories and dreams it will create. It's a dream job for me and for so many of my colleagues. I hope that you too can enjoy the same with your officiating. Thank you.